I'd like to call to order the August 17th, 2021 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. And I'd like to first start with the roll call, starting to my left.
Hodge Patel.
Todd Chernick.
Stephanie Butler.
Don Kurt.
Note for the record, Jason, Brenda Hampstead are not present. However, with 4, we do have a quorum. If you'd please stand and join us for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4 on our agenda is approval or amendment of our agenda. I'd make a motion to approve tonight's agenda as published.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the published meeting agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. That motion passed unanimous. Item number 5 on our agenda is approval of our July meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the July meeting minutes.
I'll second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving our July meeting minutes as published, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. That motion also passed unanimous. As we move into item 6, which is consideration of primary variances, I'll point out that the Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-judicial board comprised of resident volunteers of the City of Milton. The board is charged with hearing requests for variances from the standards of the zoning ordinance and appeals of administrative determination. With regard to decisions on primary variances, which we'll be hearing tonight, the board's basis for decision is provided by these 4 considerations. A, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. And B, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. And C, relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good in surrounding properties. And D, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. With that, I'd ask staff to please introduce item V21-15, 2540 Hopewell Road.
V2115 2540 Hopewell Road. Requested variance is to reduce the setback of the building housing animals from 100 feet to 35 feet along the east property line, to reduce the setback of existing fence, that is pen or run, from 200 feet to 10 feet along the east and north property line, and 80 feet along the west and south property line. Third is to allow existing gazebo to remain as shown on the site plan received by the Community Development Department May 24th, 2021. The site is a 6-acre lot on south side of Hopewell Road and the east side of Cockburn Road. The property is zoned AG1 and is located in rural Milton Overlay District. The property is being used as kennel since 2014. It has an animal care facility of 16,500 square feet and a caretaker house of 1,500 square feet. There is a gazebo on the northeast corner and multiple pens on the front and rear of the main building. The property is enclosed on all sides with a permitted 4-board wooden fence. Exhibit A is showing the existing conditions on the property All fences, including pens, are highlighted in the pink. Section 64, 415A9 states that a kennel, a veterinary hospital, or a veterinary clinic provided buildings housing animals are fully enclosed and at least 100 feet from all property lines, and pens, runs, etc., which are not located in a fully enclosed building are at least 200 feet from all property lines. The animal care facility on the property is more than 200 feet from the proper, property line on the north side of Hopewell and 35 feet from the east side of at Cockburn Road. Therefore, the first variance is requested for the reduction of required building setback. Next, the existing fence for the pens and runs on the property is 10 feet along the east and north property line and 80 feet along west and south property line instead of 200 feet as required. Therefore, the second variance is requested. Per section 641142B4, accessory site feature as defined in the zoning district of this zoning ordinance shall be placed in the least visible location from the public street and shall be screened from the view of any right-of-way or any property zoned, used, or developed for a residential use, including the AG1 zoning district, by one of the following means. A, placement behind the principal building. B, erection of 100% opaque fencing around the entire accessory structure, which must be constructed of same type of exterior material and exterior material used for the building. Or C, by a vegetative screening, which shall consist of evergreen shrubs, be 3.5 to 4 feet at a time of planting and reach height of 6 feet within 2 years of planting. The gazebo built without a permit is located not behind the principal building and it is visible from the Hopewell and Cockburn Road. Therefore, third part of the variance is requested. Exhibit B is showing the gazebo and a fence. Exhibit C is showing the locations of all existing fences as built. On July 6, 2021, DRB met and had following comments. DRB recommends approval of the variances part 1 and 2. DRB recommends not approving the variance for part 3 and recommends removal of the gazebo. Staff response. The first variance request. A kennel is allowed on the property by right, but the required setback is 100 feet from all property lines for a building housing animals. The animal care facility is more than 100 feet from the north, south, and west property line, but only 35 feet from the east property line. This building is more than 200 feet from the structures on the other properties in the neighborhood. The building was built with the city's approval without any variance following section 641142G3A. This section states that for all property and lots located adjacent to public right-of-way and 400 feet or less from an intersection, buildings except for accessory structures shall be set back no more than 20 feet from the edge of the required landscaping strip or easement. This 20-foot yard area may be developed with a combination of landscape and hardscape elements such as plaza, fountain, benches, tables. Additional shaded trees planting are encouraged within public gathering places and alongside the pedestrian paths. Buildings shall have varying setbacks to create informal crossroads community settings. Clearly, this code is directly contradicts the requirement of 100 feet setback. And per section 641119C, whenever provisions in this division conflict with any other article in the zoning ordinance or other city ordinances or regulations, the stricter of the two provisions shall prevail. So the stricter requirement of 100 feet setback should have been used, but it was not applied. This produced an extraordinary situation not caused by the variance applicant, and the relief, if granted, would not cause a detriment to the public good and surrounding properties because the nearest neighbor is in support of the applicant. Therefore, the first part of the variance may be granted. For the second variance request, the existing perimeter fence was approved by the city for the property in 2014. The city does not have record of fences approved for pens on the property. The staff notes that the Exhibit D, which is from the applicant's land disturbance permit submittal, including the original fence permit, it does not include the fencing that creates 3 pens on the south side, but just identifies it as a septic area. Presently, the canal has 3 pens on the rear and 3 on the front side of the main building. The 3 rear pens are 80 feet from the south property line. However, there is a dense tree buffer in the rear between the neighbors and the pens, as required by the zoning ordinance. The 4th pen is on the northeast side, 10 feet from the traffic circle at Hopewell and Cogburn Road. It is more than 200 feet from structures on the other properties across the street. The 5th pen is in the middle of the driveway and is less than 200 feet from all property lines. The 6th pen is in the front yard, 80 feet from the west property line. In summary, none of the pens are at 200 feet from all property lines. Given the size and shape of the property, a pen at 200 feet from all property lines will be less feasible or useful. The applicant has a support letter from south side neighbor, which is the nearest to the property. One of the properties on the north side is the Bethwell Community Center owned by City of Milton. The literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship to continue the operation of the canal. Therefore, the second part of the variance may be approved with the condition to install additional landscaping that is compliant with the rural viewshed to mitigate the impact on north and west side and to maintain the tree buffer on the south side. For the third variance request, although very useful to supervise pets outdoor, the gazebo was built without a permit. It is not behind a principal building or covered with any type of screening. There is no hardship due to size, shape, or topography that requires the gazebo to be at that location. Therefore, variance to allow the accessory structure to remain may not be approved. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends approval of the first variance request to reduce the setback for the existing building from 100 feet to 35 feet. Staff recommends approval of the second variance request to reduce the setback for existing fences for pens as built per site plan received on May 24, 2021, with a condition that the existing tree buffer on the south of the property to be maintained as is, and a new landscaping compliant with the rural viewshed and approved by the city arborist to be installed on the north and west side to reduce and create a new buffer. Staff recommends denial of the third variance request.
Shuba, can you please put Exhibit A, or at least have it ready, and Exhibit B, or C rather, Exhibit A and Exhibit C for the reference and for public viewing? I failed to mention, but all city meetings are recorded and available via YouTube now, right? So we often have people joining in remotely. So as you noted in the staff report, the areas highlighted in purple reflect the fences with the pens. And then the gazebo near the roundabout corner. Okay, and then Exhibit D, we could show that as well. That's the, did I say D? I'm sorry, C, the picture. Looks like maybe a Google Earth picture. And then Exhibit C. One over, that's, that you're showing B right now. The aerial, there you go. Okay, I think we could probably leave that up. Is, other questions for staff before we ask the applicant to present?
I just want to be certain of something. So if there's no lack of compliance today except for the gazebo, from what I'm reading this. In other words, what staff is saying here is that the previous approval, whatever that was by the city, is in effect. Am I wrong on that? So that they don't even need the variances apparently 1 and 2, because it seems you're saying it's already in line with what the city approved. Am I interpreting that correctly or no?
Well, city approved, but they should have advised the applicant to have the building 100 feet. Instead, it was, 35 feet on one side. And
Right.
so there was a complaint about code compliance, and we have to look into it again. And that's why we are here to bring them to the compliance.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to understand. So the city's code compliance people brought this up as a violation. For 1 and 2 anyway, or at least.
Yes. Someone complained, and
Okay,
that's,
someone, yeah. Okay, and they ended up getting involved in, okay.
yes.
All right, I think I understand, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, any other questions for staff?
Do we have any letters of support
So-
or opposition to this that were submitted by email?
Not by email. The one that's in the package you have from the south side neighbor. That was
It wasn't in our,
received with the application.
right, it was in our electronic version,
Oh,
not in the
electronic,
printed
sorry.
version.
Okay.
If-
Go get it.
Well, if you have,
The support letter.
yeah, we'll just, when we get to public comment, I'll just have you read that into the record in terms of the
Okay,
support.
but I need to go get it out of.
Okay. Okay, so if, any other questions for staff before we have the applicant? I'd ask the applicant to please come forward to help us understand what's going on.
Good evening. My name is Matt Engelke. I'm at 13605 Birmingham Highway, Milton 30004, about a whopping mile and a half from here. This is my wife and I's property that we developed and built back in 2014. We built, as the stamped plans from the city of Milton provided us with the building location, the fence location. The one thing I will say is the gazebo, I get, we didn't follow the appropriate protocol. But as far as it pertains to the building location, we were very heavily involved with the city, because as everyone probably knows, that roundabout was being built at the exact same time that our kennel was being built. So therefore, we worked closely with the transportation department to ensure our turn lane was incorporated into the roundabout, as well as the location, and trying to meet with City of Milton, the rural overlay, as well as Fulton County, to ensure that resembled Milton appropriately, which is the building that is therefore been in existence since 2014, as I said. All the fences that are in place were in place prior to our opening in 2014. So there were subsequent permits for fencing that were applied in February and March that we have record of. Just, I've canceled checks, if that counts for anything.
Right, no, that's good.
You know, I don't have
In
the.
2014.
In 2014, yes, correct. So I think that, you know, the belief is, on my side, is that in 2014, we were in compliance and with the city of Milton, and here we are 7 years later. Our operations have not changed one bit during those 7 years, and here we are asking for variances to be in compliant with the city.
As part of you going through this process, you indicated permits and whatnot. You also, were you also required to put together a landscape plan?
Yes, and
And-
that's included in the original stamp plans if you guys want to look.
We have images of those as well. So the shrubbery and trees, tree save as well. There's some very large
Yes.
specimens on the property. But the shrubbery and the trees along the perimeters, what was planted according to the landscape plan.
100%, yes.
Okay.
And we've actually repurposed pine trees, saplings that were in the back rear portion of it when we lost one of our big oak trees in the upper, I don't know if you can see, upper northwest corner. We had a huge oak tree that fell, and we repurposed a lot of the saplings up there in order to take away from the dead space, for lack of a better term.
Okay. We were starting to talk about the gazebo.
We want to go there, huh? I would be remiss if I said we followed probably all protocol. I would love to be able to call back the individual that installed it. However, he's no longer with us and here on this earth. So it's emotional from that standpoint. I understand it's not in compliance with everything from the city of Milton perspective. If the board decides that it needs to be removed, I'm in agreement that we will remove it. I would just ask that we not have to go through the removal DRB and everything else meetings to get it removed. And if you guys decide that it needs to be removed, that we're okay to start that removal process.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant?
What year was the gazebo constructed?
2016-ish.
2016. And then a follow-up question related to erecting the fences. Were there any interior fences that were added after the initial permit was requested back in 2014?
There were multiple fence permits that were done from the original site plan. The original site plan was stamped and approved in July, but we had approved for subsequent fence permits in February and March that pertain to the interior.
That was February and March of 2014?
Correct.
Okay.
In
Yeah, so-
July of 2013 for your stamp plans?
Great question.
And you opened, I think by the record, it said in late 2014 with your CO?
May I approach you?
No, go ahead, just read it, we'll,
Final city of Milton, 7/8/14, 7/9/14, 7/7, 7/3, and 7/6. All 14.
of 14. Want to take a peek at that?
Okay, those are the plan approvals. Site development permit.
Thank you.
Here is, if you need.
Do you want to see something specific with it? 'Cause
No,
didn't-
we have actually an image of that. in our packets.
Installed according to that plan.
Yes, that's actually the LDP we have as Exhibit D in our packets. It just didn't reflect all the fences that you've since indicated were filed under separate permits. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I saw any of the size of that gazebo. How big is that?
12 by 10 approximately.
Fairly small.
It's mainly, the purpose was for, as we were, 2 years young at that time, the trees hadn't matured enough to provide enough shade. It provided a quote-unquote doghouse for dogs during playtime, that they could go in, get water, and go out and continue to play.
And there's, excuse me, there's room there for you to put in a screening of landscaping if you needed to?
If we needed to. Yeah, if there's pictures, I believe, in your packet that show the side views of going north and south on Cogburn Road, that you can see there's 6 large evergreen bushes that are probably, at this point in time, they are 10 to 15 feet tall. So you really are only looking at that gazebo when it's straight perpendicular to it from a view standpoint.
Yeah, we have some good images in our packet and Exhibit B.
I have a question, I guess more for staff. Can I
Sure.
add this one? If we were to decide to allow that gazebo, what does that imply in the fact that it doesn't have a building permit, hadn't had a building permit? And we could apply a variance maybe, but are we allowed to do that in light of that it doesn't have a building permit? I mean, is that something that we could even do if we wanted to do?
So if you ended up approving the variance to allow that structure in the front, we would request him to do a building permit after the fact. That's not uncommon to get people in compliance, so.
Thank you.
Good question.
I do have one question, and I think it was more for, and I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question, but it's more for kind of the city, was the recommendation of adding additional landscaping. I'm trying to understand the impact that this would be trying to mitigate, I guess, for lack of a better term, and why the recommendation was to install even more landscaping on this property. Is it?
That's a fair question.
Well, it was for more of creating another buffer, just like on the south side, we wanted to create a buffer on the north and west side.
When you say buffer, is it a buffer of noise, of appearance?
When we mean buffer means vegetative tree buffer.
So
Yeah,
are we trying to hide the business in the building?
the purpose of buffer is to separate the users so that, they can protect each other from noise and any kind of nuisances. So that is the purpose of buffers.
Because the roundabout has, approximately 20,000 cars that go through it on a daily basis. I think there's more noise from cars than there are from 12 barking dogs in a group play that are playing in an acre. I'm just, from a business owner perspective, sight lines, staying true to the city of Milton with floorboard fencing. If we're trying to hide our property and our building, it's kind of defeating the purpose of having a business where our sign is one sign due to variances and due to code. And we understand that. It's just, it seems to be taking away from what we've created. And if it's a landscaping issue of it not being well taken care of, I don't know many properties that look like this one that are not residential. I'm just trying to understand what we're trying to mitigate, I guess.
So if
Right.
I could interject, so it's not the vegetation's not necessarily on the front of the fence, but behind it. And then also it's not to create another 80-foot buffer, obviously, along there, but to help mitigate, like Shuba said, the uses and, you know, possible, seeing of the dogs in the pens if the board so chooses to approve it. And obviously, they don't have to make that recommendation. They're unilateral decisions, so whatever the board ends up making the decision, they can either go with the staff recommendation or not, so.
Understood. I'm just trying to understand, in addition to the stamped landscape plan, where that kind of authority stops of, could be tomorrow that I need to add more.
Tonight we'll know. We hope. You hope. Maybe this is a good segue from a question standpoint in terms of your neighbors. Part of where all this comes in is impact to surrounding properties. It's one of our variance considerations, right? I think it was mentioned earlier that there's a letter of support from the southern neighbor, which would be nearest to the pens at the rear of the building.
Correct. Joel and Jenny Christensen.
Okay.
Joel actually helped build our fences.
And then adjacent to the west, sorry?
South. To the immediate west, we have not had any conversation with that individual and that husband and wife since 2014 when we were building.
All right, any complaints registered?
Not from adjacent property.
Okay, I think it was noted from the staff report, the structure's over 200 feet from that nearest pen.
Yeah, they are the 200 feet from most of the neighborhood properties or the structures.
Surrounding
Yeah,
structures.
yeah.
And do you guys, as the city of Milton, have a complaint with your Bethlehem Community Center?
Bethwell?
The community center across the street, you guys are one of our neighbors. We didn't reach out to you. We thought you
Understood,
guys
yes.
would be able to reach me, so.
And part of in putting up the aerial view in Exhibit C was to show there is quite a separation and quite a buffer to the adjacent property owners of resident property owners. Any other questions? Any other, yes?
Do you have any plans for any major changes on this? Because
None.
if, so the variance could possibly approve to say just for this particular site plan the way it is.
I have no desire to add anything unless it is me repurposing more trees because some die.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the order of business for tonight is you've had your opportunity to share your application. We'll now open it for public comment, and then there'll be an equal amount of time for the public to speak in favor or against, equal time for against, I should say. And then you'll have a chance to make a closing comment if you feel necessary, okay? So with that, I will open the floor for public comment. We've spent every bit of 15 minutes hearing the application from the applicant, and I would allow up to that amount of time for opposition to speak, but not to exceed. And that's in total. Before we do that, there's some reference to the southern property owner. Could staff please read that support into the record? Just the name, address, and date.
Oh, well, we just have a name on the letter, but
Joel Christensen.
Joel Christensen, and
written on May
It-
22nd.
yeah, it's written on May 22nd, 2021. I think no,
Yeah, that's-
it's 14595 Cockburn Road is likely to be the address. That's
Okay,
on the-
adjacent to the southern border of the property. Okay, and that's all the letters that staff has?
The letters, yes, we do have a public comment in opposition.
Okay, in opposition. Okay, so we'll move to anyone wishing to speak in opposition. If you will, please fill out a yellow comment card, and I'll ask you to introduce your name and address for the record.
Mr. Kamak,
How are you?
Hi. I'm Chris Kamak. My wife Susan. We live at 12995 New Providence Road. We own Rough House Kennel and Daycare at the corner of Doris and Birmingham. Just first, I want to say we do not oppose these variances at all. We fully support Countryside. It's a beautiful facility. It provides a service that's needed, and they do a great job with it. But I want to remind that we were here last year asking for the same variances, very similar variances, actually less variances. We also wanted to have dogs be able to be off-leash play, but the setbacks of 200 feet are just, they're prohibitive, and they're prohibitive here at Countryside as well. The DRB voted unanimously to deny us, and all but one of you voted the same. The real difference, I think, here that we see is that Countryside's was allowed to build a facility and operate regardless of compliance to these codes. So they have the benefit of coming up and asking for forgiveness. It's here, everyone said it was okay, so let us keep doing it. We did it right. We came and asked permission. We let us build these, and we were turned down. So I think what this shows is there's two issues here. One, these codes really just aren't applicable anymore. I guess decades ago when they were put in place, we were sparsely populated Fulton County, unincorporated Fulton County, and maybe they applied then, but we're a new growing city that needs these services. People need places to put their dogs. They want their dogs to be out to play and run around and have fun and get exercise. But the codes that are on the books right now prohibits that. There's just not the property out here in Milton to allow that. And the second issue that we just continue to run up against is that these codes are not applied evenly, which further, to me, demonstrates they're not applicable. But where Countryside can have dogs off leash and play and everything's fine, when we get caught doing that, we get cited and we pay fines for doing the same thing. So you've got codes that don't apply and they're not applied evenly. And so, it's frustrating. We've had a very frustrating year and a half since we bought this new facility, and that we're not allowed to do what our competition's doing. But as I said, I want y'all to accept these because this is what the community needs. It's a great service, and we want to be able to provide the same. But it's just going to be another step where the city of Milton is giving competitive advantage to Countryside and continues to not let us do the same thing. And I just can't understand the reason why. So we just hope, we don't know the method, we don't know the channel. How do we get these codes updated? They were just adopted from decades old code from Fulton County, and they're clearly not applicable anymore. And Matt, I'm sorry for pulling you into this, but it's frustrating watching Countryside being able to do something and we get fined when we do it. But I'm sorry, I've said everything. Do you want
No, again, I fully support what he's doing. He runs a great business just like I run a great business. And even though we do the same thing, we're on two opposite sides of Milton. So I do not consider him our competition. I want him to have dogs off leash playing out there in their fences. What happens is when I have my dogs off leash behind a fence with shrubbery that I planted because the city asked me to, I was fined. I had to go to court and I was fined, right? It's not fair. So absolutely allow him to do this because our clients expect this type of service when they bring these dogs to these types of facilities. We both do boarding, we both do daycare. This is why they come to us, right? But the city of Milton continually treats me unfairly, and I am not allowed to do what Countryside is allowed to do.
I don't know if this is the time, if y'all have any questions for us, if that's not even appropriate. Just again, on the record, accept these variances. It does the community good. Okay. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I might ask the city attorney to weigh in regarding the comparisons as were pointed up. We don't have any other public comment, do we?
No.
And thank you for being sensitive to the time. This board takes public comment very seriously. Just explaining the comparisons of properties, we're here to look at this case on its own merits.
Yes, the principles this board considers are the 4 standards set out in the Milton City Code. Each one of those addresses the particular code as it's applied to the particular property in question. It applies the standard with respect to the impact on the neighbors as to those neighbors, to that property. So each situation is a different consideration for this board, and they apply those criteria to the situation put in front of them. Generally stated, a prior decision is most likely not going to necessarily require any particular result because of the differences in location and lot sizes and shapes and all of those issues. So you apply the criteria in the code to the situation presented before you in each case.
And we apply all 4 variance considerations equally
Correct.
in all of our cases. So thank you for reminding us and the public of that as well. The next step in the order of business would be for the applicant to have an opportunity to make a closing comment. If you care, then we will move into closing the public comment and move to a motion.
I would just like to say that, again, thank you for your time. Hopefully you'll understand and approve the variances as requested, or partially, or 1 or 2 that I think are applicable. The 3rd variance, I completely understand that it most likely will probably be denied. Completely understand that approach. I'm just hoping that the stamp plans have some merit to our operation of what we've been doing since day 1. And again, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any final questions for the applicant or for staff before we close public comment, public hearing? Okay, well, I'll make note then that public comment is closed, and I will open the floor for a motion and a second. I'll make a motion to, in these 3 parts for V21-15 to approve Part 1, which is to reduce the setback of a building housing animals from 100 feet to 35 feet along the east property line as built. To approve Part 2, to reduce the setback of the existing fence, pen run from 200 feet to 10 feet along the east and north property line and 80 feet along the west and south property line. And to deny Part 3, to allow the existing gazebo to remain as shown on the site plan. I would offer 2 conditions. One referencing that this is an as-built, as shown in Exhibit A and Exhibit D. Condition 2 is that existing trees, shrubbery that serves as a buffer around the perimeter of the property shall remain and be maintained.
Second.
As we have a motion with a second, I wanted to emphasize the staff report as well as reminding this board of the 4 considerations in terms of, I'll paraphrase, spirit and intent of the ordinance. We clearly have, let me go through each of them. Extraordinary and exceptional situations pertaining to this particular piece of property. It's clearly been demonstrated given the conflicts in our code and it only being not to the applicant's fault in that realization. Certainly warrants deeper consideration to their application. Item 3, which is causing a substantial detriment to the public good in surrounding properties. I think it's demonstrated that it has not had a negative impact, as noted from the lack of complaints or no complaints issued, as well as support from the adjacent property owner. Public health safety and welfare are secured. And the spirit and intent of the ordinance as it relates to this case, we have one spirit and intent which says move properties closer in terms of these intersections. And then we have another spirit and intent related to the fencing and the buffering from adjacent property owners. In this case, there's not the required 200-foot buffering, but there is to the property line, but there is substantial buffering between property structures, the building and residences that adjoin, as well as substantial vegetative buffering. So in that case, the spirit and intent of those buffers is to avoid there being a nuisance from operations such as this. So that's why I voted, or I'm raising the motion in the manner that I have, including the third part being a denial because I don't believe it meets those thresholds, as that was caused by the variance applicant. Any other discussion?
Yeah, clarification. We always get into the same thing, but if we approve these variances and we say it's for this as-built, and if somebody comes along, either buys the whole thing out or part of it out, those variances don't necessarily apply to that. Is that what we're saying when as-built, right?
No, I'm just, well, my intent, and the city attorney can please weigh in, my intent of saying as-built is as reflected in the plans that were in our packets, Exhibit D and Exhibit A, which reflect what is built on the ground. So if another fence comes into play, that's subject to permitting and compliance to code.
Yeah, maybe my question is.
That's my intent.
Yeah, I understand. Maybe my
That was
question
as
is.
I understood the condition, but not sure if that
So I
answers
think what
his
you're,
question.
I think what you're asking is, let's say if this property is sold to another entity, will the variances go with? Yes, so long as they implement the variances approved within 3 years, then yes, it does. So obviously, if you also choose to approve this, then yes, the variances are already implemented as we speak. So the use, well, I mean, the variances will travel with the property, not with the person.
Yeah, that's why thank you. I'm wondering if we want to put some, we've done this before, put some kind of use condition on this or something. In other words, we may not have a problem like this today, but if someone comes along and wants to, do something totally different here and keep those same buffers, how do we protect against that?
Well, okay, I think you're actually making the point of why my intent of making it as built, so that if there is any change in future ownership, that it wouldn't apply to those changes.
Right, that's what I thought you meant.
Yes,
Yeah,
that,
I was
and
trying to
that's,
clarify.
am I stating the,
Okay, there's a difference between a change of ownership and a change of use. The variance will still apply for a change of ownership because it runs with the land. Change of use actually is of particular importance in this case because it's the use of the area within the fences that actually creates the need for the variance. If they're no longer used as a pen or run, then they no longer are subject to that setback requirement. So, I mean, I don't know what other use you might be considering that would change within the pens
let's say it turns into a childcare facility.
that
It would be subject to
then the fence,
those use.
then the variance for the setback of the fence, of the run, of the pen would no longer be applicable because it wouldn't be a pen. So we'd look, there would be other potentially applicable code sections that wouldn't have received a variance, but they may meet the requirements of those particular uses.
So let's, for example, say that a childcare facility and they want to make it one of those fenced areas a playground. Conditions, code regarding the playgrounds may say
If
it
it says
needs to be
50
X buffer or X feet away from the property line. They would have to meet
They would have to
that.
meet those, yes. What's that? If the question is, would it need to be rezoned? I would have to look that up. I mean, if the code requires a rezoning for the new use, it would require a rezoning, yes.
Or in special use cases, those would all, the rules regarding those would still be enforced.
Absolutely, yes. All this does is it applies some relief to the applicable requirements with respect to pens, I guess, and the facility as well. That's the both variances are involved.
So I can think of one use that would be very similar would be a veterinary clinic. Let's say he decides to sell to a veterinary clinic. They have the exact same regulations for outdoor pens, runs, if they have dogs outside, as well as the actual building is supposed to be a certain, the same 100 feet away. So that's probably the only other use that's different that would have the same regulations, but.
I just have one other discussion point. Sure. Separate. I actually think that that gazebo probably can meet our full requirements. I don't see it as a damage to the community. I think it's pretty much in compliance with the code. We've approved things like this before in terms of barns. The only question then would be the extraordinary circumstances. I think this gazebo sits on a corner of a main roundabout. And it seems to me it's an extraordinary circumstance that nobody's going to be harmed. Nobody's going to be harmed as the one case, but it's also extraordinary that, it's nobody around it but a big traffic circle. So I would just comment, if you would consider changing your motion, I think we could approve the gazebo as well.
Actually, the gazebo is not in compliant in any way because it's supposed to be behind the main building. It's supposed to be screened and things like that. So it's completely incompliant.
Non-compliant.
Oh, just a comment.
That's fair. That's why we're in discussion. That's why we discuss these things. Generally, as a general comment, the views, and which is why I didn't add any additional conditions regarding screening, is the landscape plan that was originally put in place and has been well maintained along the way makes for a nice view shed. And, because I didn't feel it met all four of the conditions, I don't feel it adds to the view shed particularly. And it was something that was of their own doing, created by the applicant.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't feel the need for the additional landscaping because the original plans were approved and it was already on there. And to add another layer of landscaping, if it was going to be done, it should have been done at the time the plans were originally approved. So that was kind of my take on that.
any other discussion before we take a vote on this motion? So I'll just restate and paraphrase. The motion was to approve Part 1 regarding the setback for the building, approve Part 2, which is a setback for the existing fences, and to deny Part 3 for the existing gazebo with two noted conditions. One is the as-built reference, as well as the maintaining of the existing trees and shrubs buffering the perimeter. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passed, meaning Part 1 is approved, Part 2 is approved, Part 3 is denied. The next item on our agenda is V21-16, 14635 Birmingham Highway. Would staff please present?
V2116, 14635 Birmingham Highway. Requested variances are to allow the opaque fence along the exterior street to remain as built, and to allow the fence to be higher than allowed 5 feet height. This site is a 1.71 acre lot located on the east side of Birmingham Highway. The property is zoned AG1 and is located in rural Milton Overlay District. Major part of the property facing Birmingham Highway is fenced with four-board equestrian fence as permitted in Milton. However, the northwest and north side of the property is fenced with 6 feet high privacy fence as shown in Exhibit A. This part of the fence was not permitted by the Community Development Department. The code enforcement staff cited the applicant for a violation earlier in 2021. Exhibit B shows the distance of the privacy fence from the Birmingham Highway. Per section 64-417A4, opaque fences are prohibited, and per section 64-417A2, fences shall not exceed 5 feet height from the finished grade. The existing fence violates these two codes. However, the applicant would like to keep the fence as built. Therefore, these two variances are requested. Exhibit C is showing the landscaping plan proposed by the applicant to hide the opaque fence from Birmingham Highway. On August 3rd, 2021, DRB met and had following comments. DRB recommends approval of the variances. DRB recommends getting support letters from the neighbors. DRB recommends the landscape plan to be approved by the city arborist. Staff response, Part 1. The intent of the ordinance is to prohibit the opaque fences, and limiting the height of the fence along the exterior street is to protect the rural character of Milton. The code allows opaque fences on the side or rear of the property adjacent to the exterior street as long as the opaque fence is not visible from the street at any time of the year. That is in the section 64-417A7. If hidden with landscaping, this fence would not offend the spirit of the ordinance despite being higher than 5 feet. Therefore, the variance may be approved. The property is facing Birmingham Highway and it is not part of any subdivision. However, it is sharing part of its driveway with neighbor. The northwest corner of the property is exposed to Birmingham Road, Highway, and the applicant has a need to enclose this part to protect the family member. A strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship to the resident when there is an opportunity to comply with the code by concealing the fence with evergreen trees. Therefore, the variance may be approved. Part 3. Relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. Therefore, variance may be approved. The public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done by permitting the fences built with the appropriate landscaping to improve the rural viewshed. Staff recommends approval of the requested variance with a condition that landscaping to be approved by the city arborist and be installed within 6 months of the variance approval.
Staff, could we please put Exhibit D? And do we have any scale drawings referencing property lines, right-of-ways, and setbacks?
No, I don't have scale drawings.
No survey drawings?
No, sorry.
I mean, we have a survey drawing, but it's, we'd have to scale it.
I'm just trying to understand the right-of-way, and property lines, and setbacks. And so we don't have that, okay? And then maybe we could put up Exhibit C. And maybe this is a question for the applicant, but the existing fence references, particularly along the side property line, at this, were those built at the same time? That's, yeah. Okay, well, I'll address that. Other questions for staff before we have the applicant come forward? Okay, thank you, Shubha. If you'd please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, board members. My name is Lang Hang. I live at 14635 Birmingham Highway, Milton 30004. I thank you for allowing me to speak about this request for a variance. First of all, my wife and I came to the city about 7 years ago. We started a business over on Highway 9. 3 years ago, we fell in love with the city. So we decided to move here to start a family. We love the area, love the community, great community support with our business. We now have 2 businesses here in the city. Really admire, the heritage and the culture the city has provided. So when we saw this home, we fell in love with it. It was a mess. It was vacant for over a year. It was such an eyesore, but we knew we could turn it around and give it some, TLC and, make the landscape look really good in comparison to, our surrounding neighbors. So we decided to, purchase the home. And my son, he's born with he's diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So till this day, he's turning 4 in October. Till this day, he cannot respond to his name. We call him, he's just having a hard time understanding. He's having a hard time with listening to noise also. So as you can imagine, that intersection, if you guys ever driven by it, it's where the roundabout's going towards that Publix over on Birmingham Highway. It's like a Daytona 500 going through there. I mean, it is fast. It's loud. Motorcycles on a weekend go through there like it's, they're in the North Georgia mountains. So what we did was, knowing that this area, when we first purchased it, it was a huge mess. It was just, nothing there. It was just open. So we decided to add a fence. That's the only flat area that we have, so my son, Mason, can run around without any distraction. He can't understand, car noises or honks. He's, he's very difficult, for his age. But what we did was we allow him to freely run around that area without the fear of getting, hit or, probably a safety feature for our family. The fence is actually a little further from the road. It's about 42 feet away from the road on the back end, and it's on a slope, so it's about a 4 feet slope. So it's kind of dipped down from Birmingham Highway. So I do apologize for putting that up. I didn't realize, with my the company that I went with, they didn't think anything was wrong with having a fence without getting that permit due to the fact that it's further away from, the city line or city. I'm sure I don't know much. I mean, this is the first time I've had to dealt with this type of situation, so I don't know. I know that I'm far away from, it's on my property. I know that for a fact. So I'm not taking over the county, piece of property or anything to build this fence. So, but I know I did something wrong, so I want to correct it. But I do ask if, if you guys can please accept my request for this variance. I will cover it with, landscaping needs. I will get with the city and willing to work with them. I have a landscaper has been designing my front yard, which now looks really good, in my opinion, that is. But we are willing to work. It's just a small section of that property. The fence, your question was the fence built at the same time? The 4-bar fence was built prior to, it was built a long time ago. I'm not sure exactly when it was built. An investor came in and purchased the home and tried to flip it over, and they couldn't do a good job with it. So that's why we purchased the home. And we built this fence in early of, I think, February of 2019. So it's been about a little over 2.5 years. Um, since then, we try to add some landscaping, shrubs, or not shrubs, but try to maintain that area to kind of give it that the good look of what it needs to be. But I am willing to cover it up with however type of tree that is necessary. I know you guys don't really like too much of the Leland cypress. I have Leland cypress grown currently with where the existing fence is along Birmingham Highway. So it's pretty much covered the house. So I can add similar trees, but it may be too much evergreen. So I am open to the city's um, recommendations as far as what type of trees that could be there to cover it up. So I'm standing here to ask for you all's permission to keep the fence for, one, the protection of the safety of my child. Secondly, just a safety altogether, because one winter month, a car came flying through and slid and took down the 2 magnolia trees that was supposed to be there now. I'm a good friend of Miss JC over the Milton Police Department. She ran a report. There are a few incidents that had happened around that area. It's just a high-speed area. We're having a hard time making a left turn coming out of there because we can't see these cars. These cars are going, 55, 60 miles an hour, coming through there. Came here for the DRB. They suggested, I get with my neighbors because it's very important. You want to build a good relationship with your neighbors. Matt and Danielle, who I share a driveway with, wrote a letter. I can give each one of you all a copy, and if you don't mind, I would like to read it to you all. So this is my neighbor that I share a driveway with. So he says, Dear Lang, I hope you're doing well. I am writing to let you know we have no issues with the portion of the fencing in front of you in your front yard that is privacy fencing. Until you had brought this to my attention, I had no idea you had even added it. The section is small and it's not very visible unless you were just looking for it. The fence looks great and we have no issues with it. We hope they allow you to keep it. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to ask Matt and Danielle. And they're at 14625 Birmingham Highway. So they're right next to me. My next neighbor, who is to my left, facing the house, is Steve and Erica. And it states, to whom it may concern, my name is Steve Jones, and I have lived at 14705 Birmingham Highway in Milton for 24 years. It comes to my attention that my neighbor, Mr. Lang Hang, at 14635 Birmingham Highway, has installed a fence that at the moment is in violation of city ordinances. I want to let the city know that we, my wife Erica and I, have no problem with the style, design, or location of the fence, and hope that you will grant Mr. Hang's request for a variance. Thank you for your time. So they've been there for such a long time, and I didn't just put dog-ear fence or something that is that doesn't look good. I took some time and got some really nice large posts. We painted it to make it look good. So we put some money and time into it. So it's nothing we just threw together for that case. So that's why I apologize for putting up there, and I hope you guys will understand for the safety of my child, and plus it does help. I'll be honest with you, it does help with the noise, even though it's it's not a big section, and I'm not planning on adding anything else. We have fences that's already there for the entire property. That is just a small section that gives my child an area that he can roam around, and it's the only flat area that I have on our property. And I thank you for your time, and I'm open for any questions or concerns.
Sure, I just had a question of clarification. It looks like the side and rear of your property is fully enclosed with
Yes,
this
it's
fence?
fully- yes.
Was that all installed at the same
It's-
time?
It was installed prior to our purchase of the house, so the fence was already there. in the
Okay, and so
backside.
the portion that you extended,
This is, yeah, when I moved in, this area is the only area that I had installed myself with a company. I did not change anything else, to the fence of the property. This is the only area. It wasn't anything there at the beginning. It was just wide open. Yeah, so that's why we're afraid of what could happen. So this is kind of a preventative measures from something big that could happen, which it did at one winter month or one winter year when a car came in and slid across and hit and took down the two magnolia tree. Luckily, it didn't damage the fence itself. But it being on a slope, it's, once I get that nicely covered up, I mean, you guys, it won't be seen. We'll get some nice shrubbery or, any type of arborist recommendation that we can put out there.
so the side property line to
Yes.
your neighbor, Mr. Jones,
Yes, Steve
how
Jones.
close is the fence to that property line?
We're about 10 feet away. We're not even on.
So you're 10 foot inside
We're
with the
10 foot
fence?
inside my own property. So from my property to his property, we got about a 10-foot buffer in between. So there's nothing there. So I came in and, and kept it on my property. I did not, go over or touch his property.
Yeah, well,
I'm
what
with-
I'm
I'm
getting at
within
is,
my property
is there
line.
room for you to plant a
Yes,
vegetative
yes,
buffer?
there is. Yeah, there's plenty of room for me to plant something there that won't disturb, that I don't have to get permission from Steve to plant something there. Yes.
And I see from the pictures and from your proposed landscape, you're looking to potentially add more screening, vegetative screening
Yes.
along the road,
Yes.
which could have some unintended consequences of creating visual issues for that traffic that you mentioned.
Sure, sure. Mhm.
Because it's going around a corner,
Right.
which is why I was questioning the right-of-way and how far back from the right-of-way you are currently.
Right.
I can't see from this.
Yeah, from the road itself to the first part of that fence line where we added it is 35 feet.
The
And then
clo- So
it
from the edge
curves
of
in.
the, edge of
Yeah,
the road?
from road to fence is 35 feet from the first initial post. And then it curves down and out, or curves down and inwards, more towards my property, which the bottom area is 42 feet away from the road. So it's nowhere near, and it's dipped down about 4 feet. So if you're driving there, you'll see a huge slope going down, and that's where the fence has been installed. So it's way, the road level is way above, or it's kind of in the middle, if I can explain it correctly. When you're driving, you kind of see half of the fence once, I cover it up with the trees or whatnot. I mean, you really have to really pay attention, that it's there. Once I put something nicely to cover it up, it won't be a distraction of any way, because it is tucked in more on my property than it is. I understand if it's right, if where my existing fence is, which is that equestrian fence, if I did something like that I completely understand, because it's right on the road. This one is kind of tucked
It
to the
angles, you
side.
said,
Yeah, it
yeah.
angles and it goes, away from Birmingham Highway. And I wish I know this is not a city road. This is more of a county road.
State,
Or state road.
the state route.
Our state route. I wish that one day they would put a safety rail or something, because if a car comes flying there, it's gonna tear everything apart. It'll tear this fence that I currently have. I mean, people, they come flying through there, and I'm sure you guys driven through that area before. So,
Right,
you
and
know.
I've had the pleasure of sitting on our comprehensive plans, which is a process we go through every 5 years, and
Mhm.
you'll be, I think, pleased to know in the most recent plan, there's intense focus on mitigation plans to our traffic speeds
Yes.
generally throughout Milton.
Mhm.
But one of the other big points of emphasis in that plan is maintaining our rural view shed.
Sure.
And the bucolic nature of our roadways.
Right.
And the opaque pieces creates an issue with that. So on one hand, you may be helped. On the other hand, we have a very long-standing history here of
Right.
keeping, four-board equestrian rural view sheds, and that's what makes Milton unique and desirable.
And
Right?
I'm not expecting to, like I said, I'm not expecting to change anything else. I like the way it looks right now, with the four boards, along that side because it has the Leland cypress, covering it up nicely. This is more on a protective side for my son. I mean, he's, at a certain age, he's going to grow up, be able to hop over those fence, and at least one main section of it is covered with Leland cypress. This side has nothing, so.
Does staff have, based on the measurements that Mr. Heng was referring to, do you have an idea of where the right-of-way stands? Because we can't plant in the right-of-way in relation to where this fence is located. It says on here 60-foot right-of-way,
Correct, and usually that's from the center line.
right?
So it'd be approximately 30 feet, on either side, so it's,
Off the edge of the,
right, so you go from center line and then measure 30 feet side. So it's definitely gonna be past the pavement, obviously. Usually it's 10 to 15 feet. Past the pavement.
are there questions for the applicant?
Yeah, can you, do you have information in terms of the overall height of that fence, the opaque fence?
It's 6 foot.
6 foot?
Yes. Yeah, on Exhibit B, you can see where I had it diagrammed the distance
there it is.
from, the line of the road to the fence and how far it is and how, further downslope it is from from Birmingham Highway.
Right.
And then the existing fence that you're referencing that is along the shared property line, is that a four-board fence
That's
there?
4 pins, yes. Mhm. Yeah, it's just a small little section that we had to put up, and because if you look at the aerial view, it's nicely grassed with, Bermuda, and that's where we play kickball and soccer with him. And he loves going up to that area by the fence. That's the only problem, because when he hears noises, he likes to run towards it. And when he runs towards, that's what I'm so afraid of, even with the four-board fence. He can just, hop on over. And he just likes noises. And when he sees all these YouTube nursery rhymes, he thinks that he sees a bus, he starts running towards it. So this is the only way for him to kind of keep himself enclosed and keep us, from a big accidents from happening. So that's why we did it. We didn't do this for the sake of, what it looks or what's needed. It's just for the sake of, the only area that I can safely play with my son.
Definitely empathetic to, the
Right.
circumstances that you're in. We, as you heard tonight and from the public, even challenging our consistency in
Right.
evaluating cases according to our variance considerations. So bear with us as we think through those four
Absolutely.
considerations,
Sure.
and you might also think through those. Certainly empathetic to your son's circumstances. However, we also have these considerations to weigh. Any other questions? Okay. You've heard the order of business. If you could, you'll take a seat. We'll open it up for public comment in favor or in opposition, and then you'll have a chance to make a closing comment. Do we have any public comment in favor or against?
No.
Do we have any questions for staff? I'll ask the applicant to come back if you care to make any, we may have some questions for you. The, just to be clear, the requirement for opaque fences along this public road would be that if they were in place, they shall not be visible from the street at any time of the year. Most notably, then, that would be when there's not foliage.
Right.
So typically, then you'd look for evergreens to screen that from the road. And then the height limit in our code is 5 foot
Yeah, height limit is
for
5.
opaque fences.
Well, it's not clearly written for opaque fences. It's just a plain statement that height is 5 feet, limited to 5 feet.
So if it was a 4-board, it would be 5 feet. If it
Mhm.
was opaque, it would be 5 feet.
Yeah, that's how I would interpret.
Okay. Are there additional questions in the applicant or staff?
I have a question. So the part of the fence that is in between his property and the neighbors is not, is compliant.
Yes, it's compliant.
So it's just the section that's facing
It's,
Birmingham
it's
Road.
just that side fence and the corner.
Let's show, could you show it on the, yeah. It's, can you show it for, the
I think I
visual
have
from
one.
exhibit? No,
See?
C, exhibit C? Portion that's highlighted in red is non-compliant. Because they both can be seen from the road. Is that correct?
Mhm.
That's staff's interpretation.
So I guess my question is, the opaque fence that's facing Birmingham Road with vegetation as opposed to extending the 4-board in that space, replacing the opaque fence that faces Birmingham Road, I don't see the difference as far as safety goes between the two. I guess I don't really have a question. That was just a comment.
Okay, are there any, Mr. Hang, if you have any final comments, this is the time to do that. If you don't have to, but you can hear our discussion and our questions.
It also serves, a little help with the sound barrier there too, because on the, where the existing fence are along Birmingham Highway, I have those Leland cypress. They're huge and they really help with the noise. That area over there doesn't have any large trees. It has southern magnolias, but it doesn't protect anything. So this really helps with the sound noise. If I can grow the Leland cypress, it will make it consistent. I mean, it'll look nicely all the way along the roadside. So it'll actually just cover my entire house too. I mean, we've done a lot to the house, so we want to showcase the house. But in retrospect, I don't mind just putting Leland cypress consistently through. I mean, it will look. I've seen,
It'll look like a
proper-
wall
Yeah, it
of
just look
Leland
like a wall.
cypress, though. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily,
I know
what
you
we're
guys.
after.
Yeah, I know, but I've seen us on.
And
I'm
they
not gonna-
die.
somewhere in Bethany Road, there's somebody's home that just put a bunch of them up there. So I just don't. I know it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look good, but I do want. There are certain trees that I can put there that could be year round. That is green. It doesn't shed the leaves.
Right,
with
yeah, we'd
your
leave
all's
that
recommendation.
to
Sure,
the-
I don't
to
know
the
much
city
of
arborist,
I
but
don't know
yes.
much of landscaping, but my landscape company, along with the city arborist, can work something together alongside. Like I said, that's why the design board was saying, get with you guys. You guys have better experience than I do. I just put something together on to show you guys what I could do to hide it. But I'm sure there are better ways, better trees, more attractiveness. So I'm willing to make that move to get that nicely covered and nice landscaping. So when people drive it, they're not going to be like, oh, this is an eyesore. So I'll do what I can to take care of that situation.
I have another question. So if the applicant extended the 4-board fence to meet the the opaque that's in between the neighbors and got rid of the opaque that faces Birmingham Highway, would the arborist have to be involved if he wanted to plant Lelands in front of the equestrian fence?
Question for staff.
No, but his side fence is also a little bit visible, so we need to conceal that part. And we would, I mean, this, we really look forward to your decision on that one,
The,
because it's all included. It's not just, we're not just talking about front part, the corner, the entire corner is in question right now.
Okay.
And also, the fence actually helped with, I have a pool back there. With a 4-board fence, you can see right straight back to the pool. So we have no privacy at all. With this, it does help buffer some of the visibility. When I'm out there, with the family members, at the pool. With a 4-board, you can completely see it, the pool back there. So this does help because it's on a slope. So with it being that height, it does help with, people seeing through our, what we're doing back there in the backyard. So that does help. Because if we plant something with a 4-board, it's going to take years for it to reach, a certain height. And I'm willing to, cover it up with, a mature tree as we speak to cover that existing fence.
Right, well, we're here, the puts and takes regarding the mitigation. For me, I still have to get over the meeting the conditions to even continue to allow it. So appreciate your willingness and flexibility to work with what the city arborist might suggest if that's the path that this board chooses to go down. So I hear you loud and clear on that.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So if there's no further questions for the applicant or staff, then I'd make a note that the public comment is closed, and I would open the floor for a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion on petition number V 21-16, 14635 Birmingham Highway, to deny allowing the opaque fence along the exterior street to remain as built, and also to deny allowing a fence to be higher than the allowed 5-foot height.
I'll second. So we're in discussion. Hodge, you raised the motion.
Yeah, one of the items that I'm having a challenge with is, one, we have the 4 requirements that we have to meet. And one of the requirements is also to protect the rural view shed along that. In terms of the existing 4-board fence that's there, it could certainly be extended out. However, it may not necessarily be ideal, but it still could be done. It could still protect the rural view shed.
Can I just make a comment? I just want to make sure when we refer to the rural view shed, because this is not within a platted, a major subdivision, it's a minor plat or a single lot. It's probably a minor plat because you have a shared driveway. Per the code, minor plats and single lots are not required to meet the rural view shed. Obviously, if you mean in general, keeping the general look of the rural view shed versus the letter of the law of the rural view shed, just want to clarify that only platted major subdivisions are required to have meet the rural view shed.
Were you referring to the term or the concept or the code?
The overall concept.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that was clarified.
That's a part that I'm struggling with as well. The rural impact of the view up and down Birmingham Highway, up and down Freemanville, up and down Providence. We have multi-million-dollar houses and estates and equestrian and 4-board fences and open views throughout Milton. And so the spirit and intent of the ordinance is to maintain that. That's why we don't have these opaque fences very frequently anywhere in Milton.
And one,
Can it be screened? Can it be mitigated? I think that's the the point that staff was working towards in terms of having it fit within the ordinance. Questionable.
I have just a question here. I'm not sure, if you put a 4-board fence on, are they allowed to put what do they call it, hog wire?
Yeah,
on-
wire
so-
mesh, yeah.
Wire mesh, okay.
In terms of getting through it, just like you would like for, if you had a pool or
Yeah, I mean, you'd
dog
want to,
or,
with his.
Safety.
With his, for safety, his son and the pool and everything else, yeah.
and I think the point that Stephanie was raising is it can also, and Haj, it can also be screened in terms of views and whatnot. I'm struggling with the conditions and meeting all 4 conditions. The spirit and intent being a big one in the rural views of opaque fences on public roads like this, in this area.
I would just say if the landscaping was done correctly and the city arborist would make sure that, it seems like the view could be maintained, but, I mean, if it's hidden behind nice landscape, and of course, the city arborist would, would know how to do that, I would be less concerned. This is how, I guess I didn't get how long a section we're actually talking about. It looks about 5 sections of a fence, and what are they, 10 feet each or something? I don't remember. I just,
Don't have any scale, I know.
yeah,
It looks like the front corner or somewhere in the 15 to 20-foot range
Mhm.
in length, and the side is probably in the 30-foot range, maybe 40 in length.
and this seems it also has a, if I'm looking at this diagram, because the road turns, are both of those sections considered, well, I guess they both face the road, but from his standpoint, it doesn't seem like it's all his front yard.
Yeah, it's front.
He's in one section front and one section side,
Yeah, but yes, front side.
but they both face the main road.
It's beyond the front plane of the house all the way to the street for, for all intents and purposes. All right, is there further discussion before we take a vote on this motion to deny? All right, all those in favor of the motion to deny, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
So in this case, with a board of 4, which is a quorum, the motion to deny was carried 3-1. Hope you understand, we debate these things seriously, and it's not easy to make these decisions. The next item on our agenda is V21-17, 13902 Tree Loft Road. Would staff please present?
V2117, 13902 Tree Loft Road. Requested variance is to allow the opaque fence along the exterior street to remain as built, to allow the fence to be higher than allowed 5 feet height. The site is a 1.14 acre lot on east side of Freemanville Road and west side of Tree Loft Road. The property is zoned AG1 and is located in rural Milton Overlay District. For section 64-417A4, opaque fences are prohibited, and per section 64-417A2, fences shall not exceed 5 feet high from finished grade. The existing fence was built without a permit, and it violates these 2 codes. The applicant recently sold this house to a new owner, but is pursuing the request of these 2 variances for this property for an agreement between the 2 parties. This property is part of Crabapple Brook subdivision. It is accessible from Tree Loft Road, and it backs up to Freemanville Road. It has a house and a pool on site with a separate pool barrier. Exhibit A shows the location of the existing fence on site. The subject fence is 6 feet high and not visible from Freemanville Road. However, the code enforcement staff noticed it when citing the next door property, which also has similar fence. Exhibit B is showing the view from Freemanville Road. It shows that fence is not visible from Freemanville Road. On August 3rd, 2021, DRB met and had following comments. DRB recommends approval of the variance with a condition that landscaping to be maintained to conceal the fence from Freemanville Road. Staff response, Part 1. The intent of the ordinance is to avoid opaque fences along the exterior street for maintaining the rural character of Milton. The fence height limit is related to consistency in rural viewshed. However, the code allows opaque fencing on the rear or side property adjacent to exterior street as long as the opaque fence is not visible from the street at any time of the year. Section 64-417A7. The existing fence is a foot higher than allowed, but still not visible from Freemanville Road. Therefore, it would not offend the spirit of the ordinance if variance were approved. Part 2. The property is covered with the dense tree buffer between the fence and Freemanville Road. The strict application of ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship to replace the fence for a height violation. Therefore, the variance may be approved with a condition to maintain the buffer. Part 3. Relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties because it would not interfere with the rural viewshed of the Milton. Therefore, the variance may be approved. The public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done by permitting the fence as built, since it provides an added protection from the traffic noise. Therefore, the variance may be approved. Staff recommends approval of the variance with a condition that vegetative buffer be maintained to keep the fence hidden from Freemanville Road.
Shubha, can you please address the ownership item that you mentioned in the presentation?
Yeah, we got the letter.
Right, I just would like you to make sure that's clear in the record from the email you received.
The owner writes, I, Neil Papius, give permission for the Lazaras to apply for variance at 13902 Treeloft Road, even though I am the rightful owner. Please let me know if you need anything. Neil Papius.
And that's dated August 17th, 2021.
Yes.
Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah, just again, this applies no matter whether it's in the rear yard, side yard, whatever, because this appears to be his rear yard, right?
Correct. So many times you'll have a double frontage, like in this instance where you're at the end of a cul-de-sac and the rear yard might be on what we call an exterior street. So the exterior streets have, it's in the code that fences adjacent to exterior streets are supposed to be four-board equestrian and not to be, and if there are going to be stockade or privacy fence, it would have to be 100% covered 12 months of the year. So-
It doesn't mention, in that case, it doesn't mention whether it's side, rear, it doesn't matter.
Well, it does also talk about how, if, like the previous case, if there is a stockade fence or privacy fence on the side, if it can be viewed from the exterior street, it would also need to be covered with vegetation or not be seen from the street.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, would the applicant please come forward and state your name and address for the record?
Brandy Lazara, and our new address is 1213 Bassnet Drive, Milton. Same neighborhood, actually.
Okay. So you've had the benefit of hearing a couple similar, you know the order of business anyhow. What can you share with us about this fence?
We put it up prior to moving. We sold our house off market, so we didn't plan on moving, but were approached to sell. And so we originally put it up just because of street noise on Freemanville, which has gotten significantly worse, especially with the building further up on Freemanville. So when we put it up, we put it in the vegetation line so that you could not see it. And it's about, I think about 30 feet from the back of our pool. And so we have another fence that was approved originally for the pool, which was a wrought iron picket. So we decided just to put it up as close as we could to the back of the house and the pool, just as a barrier.
So when's this fence constructed?
I think
Or
it was
installed?
around February.
Of 21?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we put it up at the same time, so the rovers who are the people going after us, because they had a chain link fence originally, so there was no barrier that closed the back of the neighborhood. So originally our HOA approved that because they said we're the only two lots that are open to the back of the neighborhood, which is gated in the front. So just for safety for them, they approved it and said that that would close off the rest of the neighborhood.
Okay. And it looks like from my site visit that the fence itself, I'm using the pool fence as a reference that goes to the perimeter of your rear yard, that this opaque fence is constructed roughly 6 to 8 feet inside your property line off the road.
No, it's like 30 feet from the back of our pool. It's significantly, I mean, it's pretty far from the edge of Freemanville.
Yeah, I'm not really using Freemanville as a reference. I'm using the back of your
Oh.
property, which is the wrought iron fence you mentioned.
Right?
It looks like this opaque fence is inside of that,
Yes,
maybe
correct.
8 feet on average.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. It kind of goes down and then goes back up. So I haven't walked back there. I don't know how far it is from the original
There was a
fence.
baby deer in there today.
Stuck in there or just
No,
hanging?
I don't believe.
Oh, okay.
The reason I am mentioning that as a reference point, can staff please clarify in terms of opaque fences and screening and right-of-ways, how far back from the right-of-way they need to be built?
3 feet from the right of way.
Okay. And in the case of an opaque fence, it needs to be fully screened from view as well, full,
We are.
year-round. Yeah, what I wanted to address, and I don't know if staff is prepared, the pictures we see, and if you site visit you see right now is in full bloom, but those are not necessarily evergreens. It's all trees and scrub, if you will.
Right. We have about 40 lelands behind it that run the whole perimeter of the fence behind it. So we tucked it in between. So we have huge cryptomerias that were original from the builder, and then magnolias. And then we had a bunch of holes when we first moved in. So we put at least 40 lelands. And so the fence is in between those two.
I saw a whole row of lelands at the top of the ridge. Is that what you're
I
speaking of?
don't know do you have the same property? Because I kept getting pictures from you of our neighbor's property.
No?
Okay, that's what we kept getting in the mail, was pictures of our neighbor's house, which is visible.
Yeah, no, I walked them both. Yours is not as visible, don't get me wrong, at least right now in full bloom.
Yeah, there's about 40 lelands behind them, unless something has happened to them, but they put them in between, the fence in between all the lelands.
Okay.
They were smaller than the cryptomerias. The
others saw
cryptomerias are
something
like 40
different.
feet.
I'm trying to give a representation of where your property and fence is in relation to the road and its ability to be screened, which is a big factor here.
Todd, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you look at the page 2 of 7 from the handout, it's not brutally obvious, but you can see kind of a line and then a row of green, and then potentially a line and then some grayer. It looks like this was taken in a, winter time, so you can see that it does appear there's a line of evergreens behind a row of
At
deciduous.
the top of that ridge.
I don't know what the, I don't know what the
That's a
elevations
good,
are.
can staff please put that picture up, the aerial view? Maybe you can zoom some, yeah. And then pull it down towards you. So that's good, that's fine. The Lelands, that I thought I saw were at the top of that ridge, and then it goes down to where I believe I saw the fence. Is that correct, or
Not-
is the fence, the wood fence, between the pool and the Lelands?
Yes, in between. It's after, so there's cryptomerias, and then the fence, and then there's about 40 Lelands behind it. And it doesn't run the whole property of
Oh,
Freemanville
well,
either.
yeah, let me first apologize. Cryptomelias and Lelands,
They're
evergreen, so
yeah,
that's all.
they're gigantic.
Yeah, so-
They're huge. They're like at least 40 feet tall. And then
So
we have a whole nother row.
give us kind of the order of events. Pool,
Pool,
grass,
grass, but it's a berm, so it goes up. And then that's where the really, really big cryptomeria and magnolias are. So the magnolias are probably 10 to 12 feet, and then the really big evergreen. And then the fence, and then behind it is about another, at least, I think my husband said we planted 40 Lelands behind there. And those were original. The fence was in between. And the fence doesn't run the whole length of Freemanville. It only, so you can't really tell, but if you're looking at the pool, kind of if you're looking, oh, can I point? Oh, okay. That line right there, that is a wrought iron fence.
mhm,
So we have the opaque fence between there up to the Rover. So it doesn't run all the way down Freemanville.
mhm.
It's just in that one area because that's where all the tree line were. So we figured we'd put them there because further down towards the Union on that side, it's just crepe myrtles. So they're, and we don't see that from our house. We didn't see it from the backyard. So we didn't put the fence the whole run of Freemanville.
Okay, so the pictures in Exhibit B, Ms. Butler was just pointing out to me, actually shows some of the Lelands I think you're referring to. To the right of the fire hydrant.
Yeah, the top picture for sure. I can't see.
They're
any of
not
that.
mature, which is when it was going to be one of my questions, is how does year-round screening actually grow in this area, dense tree area that's not evergreen? See what I'm saying? So there's trees there, and if we wanted to make sure it was year-round screening, a city arborist would say, well, we need to plant
Evergreens.
evergreens.
Which everything that the applicant or the homeowner has described is cryptomeria is year-round. It doesn't shed. Magnolias, obviously, they shed some, but they're basically evergreen. And then the Lelands are evergreen. So she did mention the,
Right, so the
Great
cryptomerias
myrtles, but
are
those are
on the
just-
inside of the property towards the pool.
Correct.
The buffer, the view from the road would be the trees, which are annual, and then the evergreens, which are not. But the evergreens really aren't that big, and I don't know how they're going to really get that big with all
They're
the dense.
No,
They're
they're-
8 years
but-
old.
yeah.
They're should be.
I mean, I'm
pretty
looking at the
tall.
picture, it doesn't look that big.
15 or 20 feet. I mean, we put them when we moved in. They're 8 years of growing and they grow really fast.
And I guess I should also clarify, it is your intention or the new owner's intention to stain the fence black?
They'll have to, yeah, per the HOA. Mhm. We just told them we would continue with the variance because we got it when we were under contract, but they would be responsible for any outcome.
How did we get to this point, though, of building a fence and not getting a permit?
For how close it was to our house, we didn't even have a thought about it. And our guy that did the fence never thought about it either. And he did our original fence too for Milton. So I guess just thinking how close it was to the pool and how close it was to the house, that we already had an existing fence there that was approved by City of Milton, that we had no idea that we needed a permit. The original one was permitted with the pool, so.
Right. And
We've never built
typically
anything
pools-
else.
Typically pools have what's called a pool barrier, which is the metal fence, and that's approved per the city. So if that was the assumption that you didn't get a permit, well, it was embedded in the pool
Right,
permit.
right.
So, yeah.
So we never thought building a second fence would
Yeah, but it's
require
opaque.
it.
It's just not a common
I don't-
thing
We don't
here
know
in
the rules
Milton.
of Milton.
Uh,
We didn't know
You don't
that.
see them very often. It's
No,
concerning.
yeah, we didn't know. I mean, if we knew, we would have done it. I mean, we had no idea. And same with our fence guy. He didn't say anything either. I mean, the original fence next door was a chain link fence. So we were trying to make better of the neighborhood and do it together.
When was this subdivision platted?
So when I looked it up, it was right before we became a city, the end of '06.
Which is why it was chain
official
link as a
plan.
barrier?
I mean, it might have had to do with the construction.
'Cause
But
we wouldn't
We
allow
don't
that.
even, well, I can't speak of how it was, but since we became a city, we don't allow chain
That
link
house, yeah, that
fences.
house wasn't built till 13.
Correct, but I'm
Right.
just saying the whole subdivision was,
Yeah.
The developer.
yeah,
Yeah.
was built and the roads were in, utilities were in, and they got a final plat, and then they started building houses. So it took a few years to finish out.
Just so I understand, so I'm sorry, if this solid fence was replaced with a 4-board fence, it would sit between these two big rows of trees, one more towards the road and one more towards your house, right?
Right.
So the 4-board fence would be backed up by a row of tall trees, so you wouldn't have any, beautiful view. You'd see these other trees behind it, right? And in front of that 4-board fence, you'd have something blocking the 4-board fence that you would barely see that fence. So I'm not sure what we're doing by putting a 4-board fence between two rows of fairly large trees when you're not really going to see it anyway. And if you do see through that first row of trees, it's going to be backed up by a big row of Lelands, I guess. So you see a fence sitting up against a bunch of Lelands. That's not like exactly what I picture as a 4-board fence looking out onto a pasture with horses in the background, I mean, that's what I picture Milton,
Right.
But-
Well, no,
but-
if we still lived in the home and we were told to take down the fence, we wouldn't replace it with anything.
Mhm.
We just did it for street noise.
Yeah, I'm just
So
saying,
we would have just said, okay, we'll take it out.
I'm just saying I don't see a big if you replace the fence, it's in compliance. But from a view standpoint, I'm not sure you're going to see anything better because it's still got a row of trees behind it. It's got a row of trees in front of it. I don't see the advantage to the city in terms of a better view either way. I don't know. That's just my thought. I wanted to make sure I understood where the trees were correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just more for a noise barrier, just for us.
Mhm.
So,
Any other questions?
I had a question for the applicant. You stated earlier that I believe you lived in this home for about 8 years or so.
mhm.
Can you give us your understanding in terms of the visibility through that tree line if you were on the road?
When we first moved in, it was really bad because there were just a lot of holes in between the original trees that the builder put in. And then we lost a bunch of magnolias. So there were several huge gaps, about 8 to 12 feet wide. So then we backfilled it. Our goal when we first moved in was just keep putting vegetation, just evergreen, 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 to the point where you couldn't see it because we could see cars coming up the road from the Union and they would kind of shine in just a little bit on into the house. And so we just kept, every year, we would just continue to put more and more evergreens.
So the fence was installed, I believe you said in February of 2021. So basically in the first couple months after it was installed, where the trees weren't as full, could you still see the fence at that time?
From the view
From the
from
road,
my house?
from
I
the
mean,
road.
Freemanville.
Oh,
From
from
Freemanville.
Freemanville? I mean, when the brush is not there, maybe a little bit, but there's still the evergreen trees that are on the other side of it. I mean, we made sure that they went in between it because we didn't want to lose all those other trees anyways. We knew if a fence went in front of them or behind them, that no daylight would get to them.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay. You can have a seat. We'll see if there's any public comment. Do we have any public comment?
No.
I should ask, do we have any letters from any surrounding properties?
No, we didn't get any feedback.
Okay. You have an opportunity to make a closing remark if you care to, otherwise we'll move into a motion, so it's up to you. You're fine? Okay. Any final questions for staff? All right, I'll make a note that the public comment is closed, and I would open the floor for a motion and a second.
I'll make the motion then to approve this variance. What do you got? We got petition V21-17, and that the existing landscaping will stay as is and be maintained. And I don't think there's any other conditions I needed to add.
We have a second? Okay, the motion is not carried in terms of a second. So I'll open the floor again for a motion. I'm going to make a motion to deny V21-17, Part 1, not allowing the opaque fence, and also denying Part 2, not allowing a fence higher than 5 feet.
Second.
I'd offer that I'm having issues with this meeting the 4 conditions. In particular, the spirit and intent of the ordinance and maintaining our view sheds, Birmingham Highway, Freemanville, Providence are all very open, wooded view sheds, pastures. And Part 2 regarding the extraordinary and exceptional situations, I just don't see them with this property. It's serving a noise barrier, as noted from the applicant. And so that's what led me to that motion. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I agree with the chairman that I was having difficulty with the fence actually serving a real purpose outside of a noise barrier. And there's 4 considerations that we have to take into our evaluation, and we can't select one of the 4. It's got to be all 4 that we need to meet. And unfortunately, if we can't meet one of those 4, I'd have to say that I'd have to deny the request.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of denying Part 1 and Part 2 of this V21-17, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say
Opposed.
nay.
Nay.
Opposed, that's fine. So again, with our quorum of 4, this motion would carry to deny 3-1. And as I said earlier, we give these great consideration. None of these decisions are easy for us. Would staff please present the next item on our agenda, which is V21-18, 13912 Tree Loft Road.
V 2118 13912 Tree Loft Road. Requested variances are to allow the opaque fence along the exterior street to remain as built, to allow the fence to be higher than allowed 5 feet height. The site is 1.11 acre lot on the east side of Freemanville and west side of Tree Loft Road. The property is zoned AG1 and is located in rural Milton Overlay District. Per section 64-417A4, opaque fences are prohibited, and per section 64-417A2, fences shall not exceed 5 feet height from finished grade. The property had a chain link fence along the Freemanville Road prior to the purchase by this owner. Note that the chain link fence is also not allowed. The applicant replaced the chain link fence but did not obtain a permit for a privacy fence of 6 feet high. The code enforcement officer cited the owner after a complaint was received earlier this year. This property is part of Crabapple Brook subdivision. It is accessible from Tree Loft Road and it backs up to Freemanville Road. Exhibit A shows the location of fence on the site. Subject fence is 6 feet tall and it is somewhat visible from Freemanville Road. Exhibit C is showing the pictures of the fence and a view from the Freemanville Road. After the citation, the owner applied for a permit and proposed an additional landscaping as advised by the staff with these two variance requests. On August 3rd, 2021, DRB met and had following comments. DRB recommends approval of the variance with the condition of landscaping to be remained to conceal the fence from Freemanville Road. Staff response, Part 1. The intent of the ordinance is to avoid opaque fences along the exterior street for maintaining the rural character of Milton. The height limit is related to consistency in the rural viewshed. However, the code allows opaque fencing on the side or rear of the property adjacent to exterior street as long as opaque fence is not visible from the street at any time of the year. That is section 64-417A7. The existing fence is a foot higher than allowed and partially viewable from Freemanville Road. It would not offend the spirit of the ordinance if the existing fence is allowed to remain with additional landscaping. Part 2. A strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship to remove the newly built fence. Instead, a mitigation method can be used to make the fence not visible from Freemanville Road. Therefore, the variance may be approved with the condition to add vegetative cover to hide the fence. Part 3. Relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and the surrounding properties because with the added buffer, the existing fence would remain unseen, although a foot higher than permitted. Therefore, the variance may be approved. Part 4. The public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done by permitting the fence as built since it provides an added protection from the noise. Therefore, the variance may be approved. Staff recommends approval of the variance with condition to maintain the existing buffer and add a landscaping approved by the city arborist within the 6 months of this variance approval.
Can you please show Exhibit A and Exhibit C? So I had a question on Exhibit A. The yellow highlight area representing the fence, the opaque fence that's in question. At the lower left of the rear of the property, that fence looks to be very close to the rear property line, if not at the rear property line.
Yes.
And as I think, just to reiterate, the right-of-way requirements in terms of setbacks for fences are
3 feet.
Minimum 3 feet, yeah.
minimum 3 feet. In the case of an opaque fence, it would also need to be fully screened from view year-round. So that may be challenging. It may be within 3 feet, and screening it, since you cannot plant in the right-of-way, would be challenging. In Exhibit C, so this references the old chain link fence, which was put in at the point of the development back in, prior to the city, more than likely. And the lower picture showing when there's not much foliage. Since then, the fence has been stained black. Are there questions and clarification from staff? Okay. I'd ask the applicant to please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Bob Robers, and I live at 13912 Tree Loft Road.
So you've kind of heard the order of business here a little bit. You have the benefit of that. When was this fence installed?
February 2021.
Same time?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
February 21.
We acquired the house we purchased in the fall of 2020. So this was something that was in the works right after we moved in.
Okay. New to Milton?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Welcome. I guess share with us, why and how and what, so we can understand,
Yes,
according to the 4 considerations, where we're at.
understood. The fencing that was in place, the chain link fencing, not only was it, I guess, non-compliant from a go-forward standpoint, but it was in disrepair. It had been fallen upon by multiple trees, so it actually was accessible. There was foot traffic coming through from Freemanville Road, and when I consulted with the HOA, which is Crabapple Brook, the HOA Association president indicated that there was requirements that had to be met in order to install a fence. So we went through the HOA requirements and submitted a request for an HOA allowance, and that HOA suggested that or mandated that it must be 6 feet tall because it was a security fence, and it included the perimeter of the property. And therefore, a 5-foot fence wouldn't secure the property. So we looked for a 6-foot fence that did secure the property, and this was what was done. Contracted with, I thought was a reputable contractor, Accurate Fence Company. Asked them to not only do the work, but also to research and do the necessary surveys, et cetera, regarding placement. Either wasn't done adequately or they had overlooked some items, but the fence is in place, and while it was in place, we got a notice. The suggestion was that there would be multiple requests to add vegetation. So if that was the case, then the part 2 of the installation was the staining of the fence. So that was also required by the HOA, and it had to be done in a certain amount of time in order to comply with their rules. So we complied with their rules and stained it black. So it's a privacy fence, but also a security fence. We didn't do it so much for the noise, but just the fact that you could see cars going by, and we've got a pool back there, and the fence was broken. So we didn't install a new fence. We just replaced the old fence. That's the rationale anyway. For what it's worth, we did the measurements. I mean, and because the topography of that area along Freemanville Road is kind of like a long sloping steep hill. And the fence is at the top. It's actually at a peak. So you know, even though it's far inside the property line at one end, it approaches the property line at the other end. So I measured it to be 65 feet from the roadway at the most farthest location and 24 feet from the least farthest, from the closest to
And
the
that's from
road.
edge of road?
I'm sorry?
And that's from the edge of road
Correct,
to the fence?
correct.
24 at its closest, 65?
65 at its farthest. My understanding is right away was supposed to be 30 feet from the center of the road, so I didn't take additional steps. Of course, didn't expect to be in this predicament. So the two comments I wanted to make is that it is set back from the road. It's also at the rear of the property. So when the reference of the bucolic quality of the neighborhood, which we love in Milton, there's a lot of neighborhoods that back up to Milton, to some of the major roads, and many of them have privacy fences, some level of fencing. We thought this was an improvement over the chain link. Hard to dispute that it is an improvement, but whether it's compliant is a different question. And then lastly, the elevation is significant. It's upwards of 25 feet higher than the roadway. So when you're driving past, if you look out your window, you would see the slope or the trees and the vegetation, et cetera. You wouldn't necessarily see a fence unless you looked up and through the trees. So the fence is at an elevation that's significantly higher than the roadway, and it's significantly further back from the roadway in majority of it. And then lastly, when referenced a lot of the foliage that was suggested or referenced, it's a lot of hardwoods in there today, and of course they're not year round, but there's a combination of hardwoods and other things. Again, the fence is built on a peak. So to the extent that this was in a neighborhood where I could simply go 3 foot past and plant a Leland cypress or another ornamental cover, it doesn't necessarily allow that because it's kind of on a peak and there's a deep slope that goes beyond that. So tried to include the pictures, the before and after, and just open to suggestions on how we can maintain the security. And it is notable that the DRB passed 5-0. Staff also recommended approval of the variance, but there was acknowledgement on the DRB side that there's inconsistent policies and inconsistent applications from the fencing requirements throughout the area. Is it too far back from is it front side only? Is it back side only? And they, as a group, acknowledge that they're going to have to figure this out and come up with some standardized and then publicize it to all neighborhoods and all fencing companies to make sure we don't continue to waste everyone's time in this venture. So everybody does it in compliance with the rules. But their suggestion was that this could be approved because it was not against the road and therefore it wasn't visible predominantly, from the road because of the height and the distance.
If it makes you feel any better, I've already been in contact with the community development director to get a hold of every HOA in the city and let them know basic fence requirements. 'Cause it's a pattern.
When the HOA says 6 and the city says 5, my guess is the city overrules the city. So
I'll let the city attorney respond.
Technically, if you're subject to covenants, you must comply with the covenants. You are definitely subject to the city's code. You must comply with the code. Assuming they both say a maximum of, you would have to comply with the lower maximum of the two. If
In
one
our
said
case,
it
would be the
must-
city.
They don't conflict. One's just one's stricter, so you would have to comply with each stricter.
Yeah.
in that respect, the stricter would be the taller fence.
No, it would be 5 foot, meaning the limit of height,
The limit, okay.
the height limit. Thank you for walking us through the timeline and some of the measurements as well, dimensions, I should say. If, can we pull up the Exhibit A? Just so we're all oriented. The topography changes a lot on the backside of your property, as you know,
Yes.
but I want to make sure it's clear for everyone. So at the top right is where you referenced it was 65 foot off the edge of the road.
Correct.
And that is also where it's,
No, that's bottom left.
Yeah.
So, okay.
you want to point? Yeah, up there. And at that point is also at the steepest slope, which is 24, 25 feet is, I think, in your record. As you move down to the bottom left of your rear property, it of course moves closer to the street, but the topography also lessens in terms of the elevation from the road. Can you help us get an appreciation for the elevation at the bottom left there from the road?
It slopes down and even to the point where it meets the neighbors is probably the low point for that section of Freemanville Road. It's kind of a ditch. I mean, from the road you go down and then you come back up to come to the fence. So it's the low point. I mean, it's not uniform, but definitely from highest to
But now
lowest.
we're at, we're at single-digit feet elevation when you're done at that point.
You can see over the fence by standing on the road.
And you heard my comment regarding the location of that fence relative to your property line and
Yes,
the right of way.
and I don't dispute your claims. I do dispute the pictures. The pictures, that this version of the survey has a sidewalk and some other things that aren't there. I'd love to just take a tape measure and ensure that everybody's accurate and what the measurements should be.
Yeah, this, can staff please comment regarding the things that are noted on this survey? Such
Right.
as the sidewalk, is that a,
Yeah, staff looked at the final plat, which is basically becomes an as-built after the developer puts in the roads and the sidewalks or whatever, streetlights, as well as they were required to do, obviously, by Fulton County, a sidewalk on the exterior. And so when the as-built was made, it appears that the developer, typically sidewalks are 100% in the right-of-way and not on private property. It appears that by this survey, which it's sealed by a surveyor, that part of the sidewalk is within, encroaches or bisects part of your property.
and in your case, Crabapple Brook was platted right before we became a city, and sidewalks were never installed. That's not to say that sidewalks won't be installed based on the Milton Trail Plan, but there's no sidewalks along Freemanville Road there, even though the original developer had planned for that.
Right. So since that time, our policies have changed about trying to keep a rural view shed and not to have sidewalks to nowhere, only in certain circumstances when they're within a certain distance from a school or from an active park, so.
But in your case, the more relevant point is the location of the fence at that location, at that bottom left of your property, and the property line and the right of way. And it doesn't leave much room. The
Correct.
statute says 3 foot from the property line, and you're pretty close. I don't know exactly, but you're within that, I would think.
Yes, and we did attempt, and the fencing company, we didn't want to disturb the vegetation that was in place, and certainly didn't want to take down trees. We pretty much removed the fence and tried to reuse the post holes and things like that. So fence is kind of where it was, but that doesn't mean it was in the right spot to begin with.
Understood. And I appreciate your frankness in explaining how we got here. Doesn't make our decision-making any easier, but I appreciate you being straightforward. So on your existing pool, do you have any other fencing on the property?
On the side, yes,
So nothing at the rear?
just this
This
version.
fence.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah. So all pools are required to have a certain type of pool barrier, and not knowing exactly what the existing fence But if you don't have it totally enclosed, then that might be a
So
problem.
is,
Ma-
go ahead,
It
yes.
is 100% enclosed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
It's just, it was originally chain link, which
I mean, I don't know,
probably would
I'm
not
sure
have
the pool
satisfied a
was
pool barrier.
issued prior to that. Again, sometimes pool, did you build the pool or the previous
No, ma'am,
owner
it
did?
was
So it could be that, the pool contractor, who knows what happened, so.
So as part of having a pool, you have to have a barrier, fence barrier for that pool. And that's why I was asking the question, is there anything else? The earlier case, there was a wrought iron fence. In your case, the only barrier at the rear is this new opaque fence.
Yes, taking the place of a chain link that had no gates or anything. So wrought iron on each side and wooden picket, two-sided picket on the side facing Freemanville.
Yes.
On Exhibit B, where it says fence permit application, so there isn't an existing aluminum fence. This is the application to get one. I'm confused. The green,
We'll put Exhibit B up. So do you have that in front of you?
I submitted it, so
Mr.
I'm
Roberts?
sure I have it, yes.
Yeah. So when it says a existing aluminum fence, is that the wrought iron fence you're referring to?
Correct, on the left and the right.
But
right
there's
to the
nothing
pool.
at the rear.
Correct, only chain link, correct.
So there's wrought iron fence that goes from the side of the house, side of the property line.
okay,
And then this opaque fence at the rear,
I understand now.
formerly chain link. Oh, boy.
I have a question.
Yes.
But just before I get to you, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask the staff. Since he has this totally enclosed, just forget the variance for a second. Does that qualify for a pool? It's totally enclosed with a rear fence?
Rear? You mean against
Y- y-
Freemanville?
Yeah, I mean, if he has
You
his whole
mean
yard enclosed, he
Opaque
doesn't,
fence, yeah, they qualify.
he
as
doesn't
a-
have to have another fence right on a pool. Okay, what if that was a 4-board fence? Now he has to put another fence in?
Four-board fence also qualify as a pool
With the
barrier with the hog wire.
With the
Oh,
wire mesh.
With the, yeah, hog wire, whatever, okay. Sir, can I ask you, how much, you know how much this fence cost you to put in across the back?
About $10,000. Plus
$10,000.
$2,000 to paint it.
And it could mean potentially you have to add, so you're going to lose 10,000, you got to put a new fence up, you have to put hog wire in and see if that qualifies you for covering your pool. I don't know if that's another permit process, okay?
It is.
Okay, so you got to go with another permit process now for closing in, keeping your pool enclosed. I think we're putting an extreme burden on you, and I apologize. I think that this is way overextending what we're doing to you and in fact the previous two applicants. We're not really gaining a tremendous view shed because these houses are there, they're close to the road. We put a 4-board fence in. How does that improve anything? If anything, they're going to see your house instead of not seeing your house. I think you have, my personal feeling, you have a right to have a privacy fence, in my opinion. And I think you have a right to have something that blocks noise. So I don't know whether the original intent of this ordinance by the city and the city council took this into effect. Had they thought about the fact that people want to block noise? Had they thought about the fact that people need security for not only their yard, but you're securing the whole neighborhood because it's a gated community, as I understood was said previous, all right? So I'm sympathetic. I hate to hear that you'd have to spend all this money to take that fence down, you throw away because you just spent $10,000 for nothing. Have to spend another, I don't know, $10,000, and then you got to deal with the enclosure of the pool. I personally apologize that you're going through this, and especially with the catch-22, if you will, with the HOA, because that is very confusing, and I'm glad Todd said that someone's gonna, contact the HOAs to let them know. I think I have that problem in my own neighborhood, to tell you the truth. We have 6-foot regulations in our neighborhood. So again, I'm sorry you're going through this, and if I personally was king, I think I would say that we are greatly over interpreting this ordinance. And I would like to see that you could go ahead with this, but we'll see where the vote goes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have anything further? Does the board have any other questions?
If I may.
Sure,
This was not intended to be a privacy or a noise fence, right? We live next to the road. We knew that when we moved in. This is a security fence that's required by our neighborhood. So we replaced a 6-foot fence with a 6-foot fence, and but it wasn't to try to gain some blockage or anything else. It was just, we're trying to be compliant and with the security, and also improve, it was broken, and again, they were trespassers, so I needed to do something.
So based on what you heard here tonight, if you had the choice of addressing the mitigation of view shed and such that we've talked about along your slope, which means planting of evergreens and perhaps needing to move sections of the fence away from the right-of-way in order to accomplish that in that one area. So it could be relocating part of the fence, putting in vegetative screening, or pulling up stakes, putting in a more traditional 4-board fence. If you had to do that over again, what would you do?
I'm not sure of the question. If I had to do over, I
If,
would-
no, if that's your choice, I'm just curious.
if that's my choice.
Because you're going to have to spend more money in terms of vegetation,
I
relocating
understand.
fences.
No,
and-
I'd love to keep it and want to maintain the vegetative barrier to the extent as possible. It may not be 100% screened 24, 12 months of the year. It's very difficult to do that in a wooded sloped area, but to the extent that we can and work with the arborist to achieve an acceptable level of screening, I would welcome the opportunity to do that. I guess I should have left the chain link, but that didn't, it
No,
was
I
broken. so
understand you didn't have ulterior motives, so that's evident. Okay. Are there more questions? There will be public comment. I understand there was a complaint, so you will have a chance to address that at some point too. So you can have a seat and we'll call you back. In terms of public comment,
We don't have public comment in
well, the
opposition
code
or,
enforcement was originally brought out because there was a complaint,
yes, there was, but it was a phone call.
anonymous
so-
complaint.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought there was something more formally issued regarding a complaint. You have final say, yes, final word. Yes, please.
I presume the complaint was that the fence was yellow and quite ugly when it was installed. That's exactly when we got notified. And we subsequently, we always intended to paint it and couldn't do it right away because it's supposed to cure and other things like that. So I believe the complaint came in when it was yellow and stark and nasty looking. So I think it's beautiful now.
And in the middle of winter.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any final questions for staff or the applicant? I do have a question for staff in terms of the proximity of this fence varies greatly in terms of elevation and distance from the road. Some, in particular, the area that I called in question that's within very near to the property line. It wasn't addressed in the write-up or in your recommendations in terms of buffering, relocating and buffering. What's staff's opinion on that or view on that? Guidance?
That was missed, I guess. Yeah, that was my bad.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, well then I'll make note that the public comment is closed. And I'll open the floor for a motion and a second. I'll make a motion to, for V21-18, to deny Part 1 and Part 2 of this variance request for an opaque fence along an exterior street, and Part 2, fence being taller than 5 feet.
I'll second.
In terms of discussion, although I'm very empathetic to the circumstances of this applicant and the misguided direction that they were given from their HOA in terms of style, size, and process even, we run into similar challenges with our rural view shed, and that's something that, again, having sat on the comprehensive plan for 3 years or 3 separate sessions, it's a consistent theme from the community is the rural view sheds, and that's the intent of the ordinance pertaining to public roads and visibility from the public roads. So although there's some mitigation that, is likely in any of these cases, the elevation changes, maybe from the road creates some challenges, but yet in other areas it creates opportunity, the height versus at street level. I look across the street here at this case, and that's Triple Crown, and those houses have a view right up to that hillside. And I don't know that I'd want to be looking at that. So it's hard to screen a 6-foot fence that's at 20-foot elevation in that regard. So there's street level and neighbor impact that in general, I understand why the city has this ordinance in place, having heard from our citizens over the last 15 years or so that I've been on this board and involved with the comp plans. So I had that, because of that, I can't see where it meets all 4 of our variance considerations. Any other discussion? All those in favor of denying Part 1 and Part 2 for case V21-18, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Again, with our board comprised of 4 members tonight as a quorum, this motion to deny carried with a vote 3-1. And before we move into the next item, I sincerely meant when I said I have contacted the community development director. We have some opportunities to address some of these recurring misunderstandings between HOAs, residents, and our ordinances. So I'm sorry that you got caught up in that. We'll work to do better to educate.
Just a comment on that part.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm glad they're doing that, contacting the HOLs. From a personal standpoint, HOAs have these covenants that were established legally, and our lawyer can attest to that. You try to get them changed, it's a process.
Mhm.
And that's not something that's going to happen overnight. I'm just making a comment because I've tried to get, some of our own covenants changed in our own community. We only have 90 homes, and it's very, very difficult. You got to get everybody to agree, and you got to have legal involved, and you got to spend a bunch of money to get it all. Yeah. So I think this is going to take a while.
Well, and I don't even know if it's a matter of the covenants needing to be changed. It's a matter of directing residents to city to get a permit. And
Oh,
then the friction and the awareness of what the process is will unfold, not after the fact, not after someone has spent $10,000. And so the first step is directing them to the experts and to work to be compliant. Yeah, I understand the complexities and difficulty in changing covenants, for sure. Item number 7 on the agenda is consideration of appeals and secondary variances.
None,
There are none. Old business,
none,
new business.
none.
Can you give us some insight into our variance cases in terms of number for September?
I think we have 4,
Or,
Yeah.
okay.
and none of them are fence.
I shouldn't laugh. That's not funny. Okay. Item number 10,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. If you would, please leave your packets for open records.